As you might know, I love talking about David Cage. I find him to be an interesting director for his use of thematic elements and direction. Sometimes, he makes really bad mistakes, but most of them are easy to overlook. His latest game, Detroit Become Human, is easily one of his best works, with a great setting, lovable characters, and several great themes that beautifully play out in the story. Before I get ahead of myself, I should start from the beginning, and I mean long before the beginning. There was an early tech demo and short film that David Cage created for the PlayStation 3 titled Kara in 2012, which featured an android played by Valerie Curry being built along an assembly line. She is shown to be capable of accomplishing all kinds of amazing tasks, but when she starts to exhibit human-like behavior, the technician attempts to have her disassembled. As she pleads for her life, the technician quickly feels a wave of sympathy and allows her to live so that she can see the world. For a short film, it was intriguing, beautiful, heartbreaking, and emotional all at once, and while this would be a satisfying conclusion, I guess it would make sense to have this concept expanded on. The game is set in futuristic Detroit where human realistic androids serve people as caregivers and housekeepers, but also take their place in the workforce, which in turn causes a heavy amount of prejudice and hatred against them. Kara is purchased by a single father who violently lashes out at his daughter one night, which causes Kara to break free from her programming to protect the girl named Alice. The two escape the house and travel together to find a place where they can live freely, while overcoming many dangers along the way. In addition to Kara, we also take control of two new characters as well, an android investigator named Connor, played by Brian Descartes, and an android caregiver named Marcus, played by Jesse Williams. Connor is tasked with investigating crime scenes involving androids, and is soon partnered with a grisly, alcoholic police lieutenant named Hank Anderson, played by Clancy Brown, who openly despises him based on being an android, but reluctantly forms a partnership. Yeah, they do sort of a Roger Rabbit story arc, but the development between the two characters is actually really fun to explore. Marcus begins by taking care of an elderly painter played by Lance Hendrickson until Marcus is shot by the police and left for dead. After he wakes up in the scrapyard, he repairs himself and comes across a hidden sanctuary of androids known as Jericho that would rather stay hidden from a society that fears and enslaves them. Marcus convinces them to fight for their freedom and ultimately becomes a leader. I find that all the themes that are used throughout, such as love, loyalty, and freedom, all beautifully tie into the idea of humanity as these characters discover what it means to be human. We find that the androids are turning against their owners through a process called becoming deviant, which means that they suddenly stop acting robotic and begin to think and behave like actual people. Already that sounds a little strange, because the only trait that makes them recognizable as androids is the LED on their right temple, but once they go deviant, they can just remove it and look convincingly human. Part of that is a little distracting, and sometimes the equal rights message is pushed a little too hard, to a point where they start making references to real-life figures like Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. I actually like how each character has a slightly different playstyle when you control them. Kara is much more vulnerable, and is mainly focused on protecting Alice, and it's presented in a way that we want to see her succeed. Connor will frequently explore crime scenes which involve analyzing evidence, reconstructing events, and probing the memories of other androids. Moments like these were always enjoyable and never felt dull or too difficult. Marcus easily has the most agency in the story, as he is given the choice to deliver his equal rights message through peace and compassion or violence and force. All of these moments are brilliant in their delivery, and are accompanied by a phenomenal soundtrack and some brilliant writing at times. Moments of suspense pull you in, a lot of character building moments are engaging, and when they enter dark territory, they really throw everything at you, and I actually found that one chapter to be one of David's best scenes. And I will admit there were a few moments where he succeeded to make me cry, with happiness this time. Unfortunately, there are a few minor plot holes in the story, but one in particular is especially damaging. Okay, I'm about to drop a major story spoiler, so if you haven't played the game yet or want to go in fresh, then this might be the time to stop watching. When Kara and Alice arrive at Jericho, it is revealed that Alice is also an android. This is dropped so suddenly without any sort of solid foreshadowing, so it just feels like a last-minute twist just for the hell of it. What's even worse is that there was little to no indication of this beforehand, so if you play the game again, you'll find that some scenes no longer make sense in hindsight.
Maybe you think this is easy. Maybe you think it's my fault we live in this fucking shithole. my fault your fucking mother took off!
The very first time this is hinted at is when Kara drops a magazine with an advertisement for Android children on the cover, but we as the player do not get to see it. When I first saw it, I quickly put it out of my mind and forgot about it. There are moments like that, but then they also break their own rules for the sake of keeping this plot point a secret, because even though androids don't eat, there are several moments when characters try to feed Alice, like when Kara serves food to both Alice and her father. That doesn't make sense, and we can assume that this is something that she has done for weeks, but she still does it. So what, are they just wasting food? There's another scene when Kara and Alice can meet a mentally unstable android named Ralph, and he can subtly imply that he knows Alice's true identity, but later on, he tries to cook for her and demands that she eats. Things like that just don't add up. Plus, it would have been so much better if they had just kept her as a human girl, because the concept of whether or not an android could love a human child fits in well with the theme of the story. Moments when she's put in life-threatening situations would have been much more harrowing, and there is also a lot of strong dialogue that no longer has any impact.
You said you were with a little girl? You know humans hate us. Why are you protecting her?
She needs me. And I need her. It's as simple as that.
When I played through the game as I normally would, the idea of Alice being an android never came into play again, so why even bother? Despite that merely damaging part in the game, it wasn't enough to ruin my overall experience. Another interesting gameplay element is that after each story chapter, you are presented with a flowchart of events that show you all the potential paths that could have been taken to create different outcomes. This adds a great deal of replay value and helps show the many potential ways that a chapter can end, which can have consequences in later chapters. Not only are there slight differences in dialogue, but you will also manage the relationships between characters, and new paths will be unlocked if your relationships are too high or too low. Permadeath is present, and sometimes it adds a great deal of tension when you're trying to keep yourself and your friends alive. With all of this said, I would strongly recommend Detroit to anyone. I know this game does have its haters, but I can easily overlook its larger faults and focus on the elements that are done right, because it is definitely a must-own.